You need to kind of follow along on your own. This is on your honor. If you miss it, kind of count. Like, okay, I missed one, I missed two, or whatever. Okay? All right. And then whoever the overall winner is at the end, there will be a prize. Okay? So, these are true or false questions. First question, there was once a $1 million bill. Okay? Have we ever had a $1 million bill? True or false? Okay? Okay, just keep it to yourself now, okay? All right, so in your mind. Okay, the answer is false, okay? The largest note ever printed was a $100,000 bill, and it was from 1934 through 35, and they were gold certificates, and only in transactions between Federal Reserve banks and U.S. Treasury. Okay, number two, Secret Service was originally created to stop counterfeiting. True or false? Okay, the answer is true. Following the Civil War, between a third and half of all cash in circulation was counterfeit. And so they started July 5th, 1865 to fight the counterfeiting epidemic. All right. First U.S. gold rush, true or false, started in North Carolina in 1803 when a 12-year-old boy, Conrad Reed, found a 17-pound gold nugget on his father's farm. Okay, think that's true or false? Okay, answer is true. Okay, it actually supplied all the gold for the nation's mints until 1829 from that. Okay, you guys learned something, I could tell on that one. Okay, there are 243 ways to make change for $1. Okay, you have 1 penny, whatever. 243, is that true or false? Okay, you got your answer? Actually, the answer is false. There's actually 293 ways to make change for $1. Okay, you keeping track? All right. Number 5, it cost the U.S. Mint 1.3 cents to make a penny. Okay, is that true or false? The answer is, this is kind of a trick one. It is false because it actually cost them 1.7 cents. For every penny they make, it costs us 1.7 cents. Okay, probably another reason to get rid of pennies, right? Number 6, with a lifespan of about 4.5 years, the $10 bill has the shortest lifespan of any of our notes. True or false? Okay, the answer is true. It is true. The longest note, the $100 bill, lasts 15 years. Okay, but the $10 bill is 4.5 years. I don't know why, but that's what they say. Number 7, there are more than 1.1 billion $2 bills in circulation today. Okay, true or false? The answer is true. Okay, they are not as rare as you think. We think, I got a $2 bill. Okay, there's a billion of them out there. Okay, they're worth $2. Right? Yeah, I have several at home. I'm like, I better keep this. This is going to be worth something. Yeah, $2. Okay. Number 8, last one. The U.S. Bureau of Engraving and Printing uses nearly 15 tons of ink every day to print currency notes. Okay, true or false? The answer is false, but they actually use 9 tons of ink. Okay, so a lot of ink. That's 26 million notes are printed each day with a value of $974 million every day. Okay, so there's 8. How many did you miss? Did anybody get them all right? Okay, anybody get one wrong? Just one? Hunter! This is a $5 bill. It's real. Okay, congratulations. Very good. The tiebreaker was going to be, how many grooves does a quarter have around its edge? Okay, and we would be the closest one. How many do you think? 100? 25? Okay, no. Okay. There's actually 119 grooves around a quarter, 118 on a dime. So, all right. Good job, guys. Like I said, last week we started our series on money. We talked about traps that you can fall into and some ways to get out of them. And remember, you can always go back and listen to the messages on our website if you missed out. One of the traps I mentioned was the debt trap, and that's so easy to fall into, and it's a hard trap to get out of, but it is possible. There's a guy named Ron Blue. He once said, "Getting in debt is as easy as getting down an ice-covered mountain. Getting out of debt is just as difficult as climbing that same mountain." And that's true, right? It's a lot easier to get into debt than to get out of it. But it can be done, okay? So we're talking about the debt trap today. What is the debt trap? I would say it encompasses more than just being in debt. I would say it's being in a situation where money kind of just controls your life. Money dictates everything. And, the truth is that money has been a big issue in this country for a long time. Huge financial issues have plagued our country, both as a government, as in individuals. Our national debt for the last year, 2018, it went up another $1.2 trillion. And it's now over $21.5 trillion for our national debt. Okay, that's not good, right? You can't keep doing that forever. Individually, about 800,000 people filed for bankruptcy last year in the U.S. The good news is that's on a downward trend. In 2008, there were 1.6 million who filed for bankruptcy, and so that's been going down ever since. But as we all know, you don't have to file for bankruptcy to feel very squeezed by money, right? And so here's a few questions to think about as we start off today. Do you often feel like you can't save for the future like you'd like to? Do you have trouble relaxing and enjoying life because of financial pressures? Do you wish you could give more to the church? Do you feel like there's never enough money to go around? And if that's kind of the case on a lot of these, you're probably kind of dealing with some form of the debt trap. And so take comfort. We're going to talk about the debt trap today, debt trap. And to do that, we're actually taking a trip to a pig pen, okay? And to give us kind of a starting place on our journey of kind of some more freedom from financial pressures. And so it's in Luke chapter 15. Jesus told the parable about the lost son or the prodigal son. And in this story, a young man, he couldn't wait for his father to die before he shared his part of the inheritance. Okay, so he actually talked his father into giving him his portion ahead of time so he could go out on his own. Okay, so you remember that story. We're going to read it. And the son took the money, ran off to a faraway country, and he quickly wasted all his money, right, on wild living. And there was a famine at the time, and he had nothing left, and he ended up working on a pig farm in order to be able to even eat. And it was there that he really kind of started thinking about life. And I think, working with pigs would make you do that, right? And so that's where that comes from. And so let's read about it, start reading about it. It's in Luke chapter 15, verse 11 through 15. It says this. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his field to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything." Okay, he lost everything. He blew it. His life was a mess and hopeless at this point. And, this whole parable, there's a whole bunch of different lessons to learn from it. Today, we're actually talking about the financial side of this story. There are a lot of things, believe it or not, that you can learn financially from the parable of the prodigal son. So let's start with a few. These are on the back of your bulletin if you want to follow along. Mistakes made by the prodigal son. His first mistake was wanting instant gratification. Okay, if he just had his money right now, his life would be so good. He was so restricted by having to live under his father. Okay, he just wanted his freedom. And this is probably the number one struggle for a lot of us. Okay, we can't be patient. We want it right now. We want what we want right now, right? It's just so hard to wait. And so it has become very easy to get into debt in this country. Here's a few numbers. Total consumer debt in the U.S. totaled $3.898 trillion in 2018. And that was actually a 7.6 increase from the year before. Okay, the average consumer debt per capita is approximately $11,880. So that means that if it was divided equally between every man, woman, and child in the United States, everybody would have a debt of $11,000. Okay, credit card debt in May 2018, it broke the previous record of the most credit card debt ever. Is $1.02 trillion. Okay, the previous record was set in 2008. So we owe over $1 trillion just in credit card debt in this country. I heard about a man whose wife's credit cards were stolen, but he didn't report them stolen because the thieves were spending less than the wife was. Okay, that's not a true story. I made that up. Okay, wives, don't get mad at me, okay? Could be the husband. Student loans, they totaled $1.524 trillion in 2018. Auto loans total $1.113 trillion in 2018, okay? We're talking $1 trillion here. It's like beyond our comprehension, right? How it's 1 and 12 zeros to get to $1 trillion. So these are just astronomical numbers. And probably the biggest contributors to this debt is wanting instant gratification. Okay? The prodigal son wanted it now, and we still want it now. Okay? Another mistake the son made. He's spending on unnecessary or sinful activity. Okay? It says he spent the money on wild living. Okay? He was living the high life, and that would have included, sinful activity. And I don't think we can expect God to bless our finances if we're spending it on sinful things or unnecessary things. I don't want to get on a casino soapbox this morning, but each of you has to kind of decide what you want to do with casinos. Some people say, it's just my entertainment. It's like going to the movie. So I don't think there's a thou shalt not thing here going on here, but I will also say I have seen gambling do some terrible things to families. I knew a guy back from my hometown who lost everything because of gambling. He lost his house. He lost his family. He had no mortgage on his house. It was a family house. Had been in the family for a long time. Ended up taking out a large loan against the house and, blew all of that and eventually lost the house. And so terrible things can happen from gambling. And so that's sinful any way you look at it, if it's to that extreme. And then there's some spending that it's not necessarily sinful in itself, but it's just not necessary. Okay, that the son was spending money on whatever he wanted. Okay, and I'm sure he had friends all over the place. When he had money flowing, hey, come hang out with me. But sometimes I think we have to ask the questions: Do I really need this? How many new clothes do I need? Do I really need this nice of a car? Or do I really need a new smartphone? And if we're honest with ourselves, I think we'll find that there aren't nearly as many necessary things as we maybe try to think they are. The prodigal son spent a lot of money on unnecessary things. He also made the mistake of not anticipating hard times. Okay, the prodigal son hadn't counted on a famine. Okay, he acted as if things would continue as they always had. He's never going to run out of money. It's going to last forever. And so he didn't think ahead to the unexpected times. Okay, like the son, many of us kind of act like, well, there's nothing bad's ever going to happen. Okay, and technically that's true. It's not just a possibility. It's actually a for sure thing. Okay, it's a certainty. Bad things are going to happen eventually. There will be unanticipated hard times in our lives, right? Okay, your car will have a big repair. Okay, your water heater will go out. you're whatever, you'll have medical expenses, and oftentimes they seem to happen like all at the same time, don't they? It's like, what in the world? It's like these groups of three or something that they tend to happen, these bad things. And if there is no planning ahead for those times, then every time that something out of the ordinary happens, it's a crisis, right? It's like, oh no, what am I going to do now? But we have to get to the point of, you plan ahead, expecting those things to happen. The son did not anticipate hard times. He also made the mistake of spending more than resources allow. Okay, it said after the prodigal son spent everything, okay, he began to be in need. So he had no income. He's just spending. And, not very many people can just keep spending money without replacing that, right? Okay, that's pretty rare. Someone said if your outgo exceeds your income, your upkeep could be your downfall. Okay? Think about that. If your outgo exceeds your income, your upkeep could be your downfall. Okay, next week we're going to talk more specifically about a budget and what that looks like and what that means. But it's a simple idea. What goes out can't be more than what goes in, right? Before credit cards became a thing, if you ran out of money, you just didn't buy anything else, right? That's it. That's the end of it. There's no other option unless you borrowed it from somebody. Okay? You couldn't just say, okay, we'll take care of this later. Sometimes I think we would be a lot better if we went back to that system again, where it's like, hey, no, I'm sorry, we can't do it this month. Did you know that research says that if one person went into a store with a credit card and another person went into the store with cash that they're going to pay for it, on average, the person with the credit card will spend 34% more than the person with cash. It's just something about, you see that cash, the money, it's like, oh man, I got to be careful. But when it's just plastic, hey, yeah, ring her up, no problem, right? And it's easy to do that. I just think we become way too comfortable spending money that we don't have in our culture. The prodigal son outspent his resources. I want to share a little case study with you. Bob Russell, in his book called Money, he tells the story of a guy named Gary that he knew. And Gary had fallen into the debt trap, and his creditors were pursuing him so much that just opening his mailbox or hearing his phone ring made his stomach churn. He was 26 years old, making $1,200 a month with over $100,000 in debt. He had a house mortgage, 2 car payments, and 8 credit cards, most with balances above their credit limits. Gary said, my marriage had deteriorated under the financial strain, and like most in these circumstances, it ended in divorce. The loss of my wife's income and the added burden of now maintaining 2 households brought me to the brink of financial ruin. But Gary decided to start taking responsibility for his actions. He sold his house, used his $2,000 profit to move into a small 1-bedroom apartment. He said, I promised myself that I would never get into such a financial mess again and that I would do everything in my power to pay my debts. Gary completely changed his spending habits. Whatever wasn't an absolute necessity, he eliminated. He canceled newspaper, magazine subscription, cable TV. He said no to any form of entertainment with a price tag. Before every purchase, he asked himself, do I really need this or do I just want it? He budgeted his groceries, drinking only water and cutting out all unnecessary food items. He put an ad in the paper, sold the furniture and appliances he didn't need. His new habits gave him more free time, which he filled by reading everything he could find at the library on personal finances. Almost immediately, Gary had freed up about $300 a month to go toward debt retirement and savings. He began paying off the credit cards with the smallest balance first. When one was eliminated, he moved to the next one. He said, although my decision to pay off credit cards with the smallest balance instead of those charging the highest interest may not have followed the most correct financial advice, he said, paying off the smaller cards faster motivated me, and so it worked best for me. Soon Gary had his spending under control and was beginning to crawl out of debt. He concluded, unquestionably, the changes I made in my lifestyle are an improvement, but they were not easy by any means. He said, lifestyle changes are the most difficult changes you can make. Until the changes are ingrained in your soul, there's always the temptation to fall back to your old ways. It took 4 years and a lot of desire, determination, self-discipline, self-sacrifice, and perseverance, but now I can say I am debt-free. I also have an emergency cash fund large enough to manage almost any crisis, and I am currently saving and investing over 40% of my take-home pay. Gary says he still has to discipline himself to meet the financial goals he has set, and not all his financial problems disappeared with his debt, but the difference, he says, is that now I control my finances. They no longer control me. Okay, so Gary was able to turn things around, but it wasn't easy. He had to make changes. He had to make sacrifices. The prodigal son had also exhausted his resources. Okay, he found himself penniless. He was alone. But the prodigal son, like Gary, took some big steps out of desperation to kind of get himself out of the trap he had fallen into. And so I want to take a look at some things that we can learn from the prodigal son, some debt lessons from the prodigal son. And so, first of all, we learn that we need to accept responsibility. Okay? Verse 15 again says, "So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his field to feed pigs." Okay? He got a job feeding pigs. Okay? It wasn't glamorous, but it was a job, and you have to commend him for that. Sometimes we have to get jobs that we don't like very much. My pig pen job was working at a turkey farm. I've mentioned this before. And it was during college in the summer. I needed to make money. And so that was the job I found. And it was not fun. Okay, so one of my jobs, responsibilities at the turkey farm, was to clean their waters. Okay, they would hang down from the ceiling, and there was a little brush that I would use to clean them with. So they would be perfectly quiet in these barns, thousands of turkeys in each barn. And so I'd open the door, and as soon as I opened the door, it was immediately, I mean, everywhere. I mean, they did. So they wouldn't shut up until you left. That was doing that. So it was deafening in my ears to start with. And then they, for some reason, wanted that brush from me. They tried to peck it and get it from me. And along with, pecking me along the way. So here's the water. I'd have to spread them out really quick, get them out of the way, and then try to scrub really quick before they come back in there and try to get that brush from me. And so I did this probably 50 times every time I was cleaning those waters out. And so it was not a fun job. It didn't smell good in there. And just a lot of the jobs were not fun. But I needed to make money. Okay, so that's what I did at that time. It was a good motivator to go do other stuff, right? Sometimes we need those motivating jobs. If you find yourself in a financial crunch, you have to get your income up sometimes. And unless you truly have no choice, the income, I believe, should not only be from the government. Okay? I believe God made us to work. If you have to deliver pizzas for a while on top of your other job, then deliver pizzas. Don't blame anyone else for your situation. Just get to work and then keep trying to move yourself up the ladder. Okay? Employers want to hire hard workers. They do. If you're trying to get a job and you say, I haven't been able to find a job for 5 years, what you're really saying is, I haven't been able to find a job that I like for 5 years. Okay? So I'm sorry if I'm sounding harsh. I think sometimes we just got to do it. Proverbs 14:23 says, all hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. Out of necessity, the son said, I have to get a job. And if we're able to, I think God expects that. Expects us to work hard. The son also had to acknowledge the bondage. Okay, the son had to acknowledge that, hey, I'm in trouble here. In our story, verse 17 continues on to say, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? Okay, when we have financial issues, we also need to get to the point of acknowledging those issues. Okay, we have to admit we're in bondage to money. I want to share quickly 10 indicators of financial bondage, kind of just to help you kind of process this. And you might kind of count on your fingers as we go along, any of them that apply to you. First one is guilt. Okay, every time you go out to eat or buy a present for someone or spend money on entertainment, you feel guilty because you're thinking, this money should pay off debt. Second one is deception. Okay, when you go out with others, you kind of feel hypocritical because it seems you're always kind of pretending to live a life that's higher than what you can afford. Third one is stress. Okay, you're just always stressed about money. You find yourself stalling creditors or paying the most overdue bill. Fourth one is preoccupation. Okay, you're worried about money matters, and it's just so much that you find it difficult to focus on other things or enjoy other things. The fifth one is bickering. Okay, money is kind of a fighting word in your home. Okay, you're always fighting about money. Envy is the sixth one. You're often jealous of others who have more than you. Resentment is the seventh one. You're kind of angry at God for not increasing your supply of money. The eighth one is loneliness. Okay, you kind of feel alienated from friends because it seems like they're all doing well and you're struggling so much. The ninth one is hopelessness. You just feel like you're getting deeper and deeper in debt with no way out. And the 10th one is low self-esteem. Okay, you feel like you're a failure because of your finances. So if 2 to 4 of these apply to you, be on guard. You might need to change some habits. If 5 to 7 of these apply, it's probably time to make some changes in your life to try to get out of this trap. If 8 or more apply, then you're in full financial bondage. You need to get some financial help. And then the son had to acknowledge the bondage. Okay, he'd done that, and then he had to develop a plan. Okay? Luke 15:18 through 19 says, I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. Okay, he realized he had made mistakes, and he was ready to go back to his father with his tail between his legs and say, Dad, I messed up. I understand there are consequences to what I've done, but can I just come back and work for you, not as your son, but just as a hired worker? That was his plan. We need to have a specific plan, okay, that's sustainable. And it might mean big changes. It might mean downsizing your house. It might mean selling the boat. It might mean selling your $25,000 car and driving a $8,000 reliable car. It might mean cutting up credit cards. Okay, if you follow Dave Ramsey, credit cards are a big no-no to Dave. Proverbs 21:5 says, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. Okay, the plans of the diligent. Okay, so we have to diligently figure out a plan of how is this going to work. And part of that's having a budget. Okay, and like I said, we're going to talk more about that next week. And then the son also had to be willing to submit to the father's will. When the son left home, he thought his dad's plan, his way of life was pretty dumb, right? It was so confining. It was just work, work, work every day. It's just, oh, come on, Dad. Give me a break. So he went off and tried his way. And most kids go through a time of thinking their parents are pretty dumb, right? And they oftentimes make big mistakes along the way. But this son went back to the father and said, I'm at your disposal. Okay, I was wrong. Will you take me back? And so he submitted to his father. You may need to go to God and say, God, please forgive me for not handling my finances well. I have made mistakes, foolish mistakes, and I'm ready to do what I need to do to make things right, to use the money more wisely that you've given me. I'm ready to submit to you, God. And then finally the prodigal son knew he had to start immediately. Okay, verse 20 says, so he got up and went to his father. Okay, the time was now, and he made the hard walk home. Okay, that it is so easy to put off tough financial decisions that we know we need to make. We can talk about it, but unless we're ready to make changes, we can't expect things to get better. Okay, either we need to cut expenses or increase income, and often it's a combination of both. But it needs to start now. So we're at the start of 2019. Now's a good time to make some changes and start that process. So we haven't read about the results of the son's decision to go home. Here's the awesome news. Okay, in fact, it is a big surprise. The big surprise is that the father threw a party. Woohoo! Right? It's a party. He didn't expect that at all. He didn't say, no, get out of here. Get away from me. He threw a party. Let's read the rest of the story. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Wow. Not the reaction the son thought he would get at all. In his wildest dreams, he didn't think there's any way that would happen. But the father accepted him back as his son. It's an awesome story of forgiveness. And here's the cool thing. The father in the story is God. And what he is wanting to do for us when we come home to him. He's waiting with open arms, ready to receive you, and it is never too late. And so the question is, are you ready to come home? Because he's waiting. He's waiting for you. And whether it's financially that you have used things, you haven't done things the way they should be done. You need to make changes. He's there saying, okay, I'll help you. Or whether it's spiritually, that you've wandered from him spiritually, and it's time to come home. Maybe you've never been home for the very first time. God's waiting. He's waiting for you. I want to read one more passage. It's in Psalm chapter 103, verses 8 through 18. And I want you to, as I read this, we have the words up here, but I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. And I want you just to listen and think about how awesome our God is, who is willing to say, it's okay, I forgive you. And so close your eyes, just listen, and thank God as I read. It says, the Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. He will not always accuse, nor will he harbor his anger forever. He does not treat us as our sins deserve, or repay us according to our iniquities. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. For he knows how we are formed. He remembers that we are dust. The life of mortals is like grass. They flourish like a flower of the field. The wind blows over it, and it is gone, and its place remembers it no more. But from everlasting to everlasting, the Lord's love is with those who fear him, and his righteousness with their children's children, with those who keep his covenant and remember to obey his commands. Heavenly Father, we come before you this morning, and we thank you that you are so patient with us. whether it be financially, where we're just struggling, maybe it just feels like everything's closing in on us. And maybe some of it's our fault. Maybe there's other things going on that we don't have control of. But I just pray that all of us can just give our finances over to you and just use them to the best that we can to glorify you, to honor you, to further your kingdom. Lord, if there are those who need to come home spiritually, say, I've been off wandering around working in pig pens for too long. It's time to come home. I pray that the people will be ready to do that. We love you so much, Lord. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Will you please stand as we sing?